guys, it's Tamara. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for coming back today to be with me. Today we're going to talk about a concept that's a little bit uncomfortable, but also a little bit political and racial. So I encourage you guys to hold on with me and stick with me until the end of this video because it's an important topic. A lot of people have asked me to focus on this, especially my subscribers of color. And so I figured this would be a nice kind of place to fit this video in on a Wednesday. We talked on Monday about the differences between Asperger's and Asperger's autism spectrum disorder and trauma symptoms. And so now I want to talk about trauma symptoms and racial battle fatigue. I also want to give you guys some information about what it is because you probably haven't heard about it. And if you have, there really isn't a lot of research on it from a psychological perspective. It's more of a sociological perspective. So I'm going to take this video and turn it into more of a psychological perspective and give you my feedback on kind of how I'm seeing it. It's a little bit of a new concept for me, so I've only done a little bit of research on it so far. So thank you so much for coming back to my channel for those who are subscribed. For those who are not, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button and stick around with us, share videos, talk, suggest topics. I'm always getting advice from you guys and suggestions, and I take them. If it's my area of expertise, I take your suggestions, pull it in, do some research, or I go back and pull from other articles I've written, and I go ahead and talk about it more extensively on this channel. So just know that I do hear you every time that you make a comment or every time you suggest something. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button and stick around with us. The benefits for you in today's video is that I'm going to take a sociological concept and I'm going to try to spin it and show you how I'm seeing it from a psychological perspective. All right, so let's just go ahead and jump in. Let me give you a little bit of background about what racial battle fatigue is, okay? So racial battle fatigue is a concept that was coined or developed in 2003 by William, I'm trying to think of his last name. His last name is William Smith, I believe it is. Unfortunately, when you Google racial battle fatigue, you don't see his name anywhere associated, but he's the one who originally came up with the idea. The whole idea of racial battle fatigue is that we can experience a certain kind of fatigue and battle fatigue that is somewhat similar to what veterans go through on the battlefield when the individual is placed in a chronically stressful environment that is hostile, that is angry, that is highly competitive, that doesn't level the playing field. So when you think of racial battle fatigue, I want you to sort of think of post-traumatic stress disorder, although it's not that similar, but it's close, okay? Post-traumatic stress disorder includes flashbacks and hypervigilance and an increased sympathetic nervous system. I talked about that in this video up here, so go ahead and check that out if you need to. But it increases the sympathetic nervous system, which is the sympathetic nervous system arousal. So your heart rate goes up, your sweating is triggered, your mind is racing, your emotions are all over the place, you might be shaking, right? You're not hungry, you don't have to go to the bathroom, you're just kind of on fight or flight mode all the time. And so individuals of color, primarily African American men, feel those same things when they are placed in a chronically hostile environment where it's difficult to compete because the bar is set so high. It is difficult to feel comfortable in one's environment because it's so hostile and dominated by marginalization and racial tension and competition. It also makes for depression and anxiety as well as generalized anxiety disorder, right? So you're kind of anxious about everything because the environment is so hostile and uncomfortable. Racial battle fatigue was a concept that came about as a result of African American men trying to survive and live within a predominantly Caucasian college campus or university. And the whole idea behind African American men's feeling pressured in predominantly Caucasian universities is that no matter how hard they work, no matter how good they are, no matter what their talent is, no matter how educated and well-rounded they are, they don't feel that the environment is conducive to their overall health. They don't feel that the environment is conducive to their overall success, and they don't feel at home in their own university. The very place that they are paying all their money to, putting their best foot forward in, and really trying to compete in and achieve in, they're not feeling at home. They're not feeling comfortable. So they walk away feeling continually marginalized, continually boxed into a category that's not their own category, right? It's a category of assumption and ignorance and lack of knowledge. And so when you're kind of pushed into that box or pushed into that category, you really do begin to feel physiological effects. There's been many studies done on how racism and microaggressions, marginalization, can truly have a psychological and physiological effect on the body. Again, your body goes into fight or flight mode when you feel threatened or you're in a chronically unhealthy or unsafe environment. That could be a psychologically unsafe environment, that can be emotionally unsafe, physically unsafe, even racially unsafe. It can lead to physiological arousal and physiological symptoms. Some symptoms include headaches and burnout, extreme fatigue and tiredness, bodily aches. It can also include symptoms of mental health nature, like delusional beliefs, right? I believe somebody's following me, stalking me, or harassing me. It can also include, like I mentioned earlier, generalized anxiety. So you're just anxious about a little bit of everything. It can include panic attacks and asthma symptoms as well. So like difficulty catching one's breath. It can cause heart palpitations. It can cause high blood pressure and hypertension. And so racial battle fatigue is a very legitimate concept. It's an interesting phenomenon, to say the least. However, there hasn't been a lot of studies on it, and it really isn't a firm concept. It's more of a concept that has been thrown out there, and it has a legitimate basis, but it hasn't been a term that psychologists have caught on to and said, yeah, we're going to make this a thing, right? So unfortunately, but I think it's a wonderful sociological and racial concept to help us understand what happens. Now, let me explain to you. Microaggressions are those little snap moment facial and bodily reactions that you may see somebody make within a split of a second, right? You may miss it. It's so fast. Microaggression. So let's say, for example, because I'm sure you've experienced this. Let's say, for example, you're talking to someone and the person really isn't that okay with you. They don't really seem to like you. You're talking to them and they're smiling. And let's say that, you go into explaining something, and just for a split second, let me know if you've experienced this in the comment section, but just for a split second, you notice an evil look, or a judgmental pierce, or a little bit of an undercurrent look of, do you believe me, right? You may also see the person twitch, right? Their nerves, you may see them twitch. You may also see them do something else, like really seem defensive, or you may see their eye contact change from friendly to defensive on you. It really is a very small, that's what's called micro. It's a tiny expression. Those expressions, according to research, have been said to be picked up on by people who are used to trauma, people who are used to being treated a certain way. So if you are used to being treated a certain way, if you are hypervigilant, if you are in fight or flight mode all the time, you're most likely going to observe and catch that microaggression much easier and much faster than somebody who hasn't been in a chronically stressful situation. So research in the field of sociology and even in psychology and even in mental health has suggested that African American males, including other ethnic minorities such as Native Americans and Hispanics, Puerto Ricans, the list goes on, Hawaiians, Alaskan Natives, those ethnic minority groups have experienced a lot of distress emotionally and psychologically because of these microaggressions. They catch on to it just like that. Whereas somebody who has had a privileged and a happy and a content lifestyle may not be able to pick up on this microaggression. So I just want you guys to keep a little bit of that in mind. So let me just give you 4 things that racial battle fatigue claims. And I want to kind of give you a little bit of information on why it needs to be a concept that we all pay attention to. So the number one thing that spurred the idea of racial battle fatigue is the fact that there tends to be no leveling of the playing field, especially among African American men within predominantly Caucasian universities. You know, there's a lot of belief systems or some kind of like a prejudice that African American males get into certain universities just because of the equal rights movements and fair employment acts and all kind of laws and kind of like programs. And, you know, there's this preconceived notion that these programs allow African American men and women and other people of color to get into certain universities. And so that kind of prejudiced or discriminatory attitude can sometimes be expressed in a microaggression. Like, you know, I've seen certain people who have come into me for counseling, and they will say things like, you know, my best friend is Caucasian, we've been friends forever, but when I got accepted to Stanford University or Harvard, I had a client that had gotten accepted into Harvard. She said, as soon as I told her that, she said to me, how did that happen? Oh, I know how it happened. I know how it happened. You know, and that comment alone was very destabilizing. And she automatically assumed she got into Harvard, not because she worked hard, not because the playing field is being leveled, but because there's a program that let you in. And so a lot of people of color feel that idea is expressed through a microaggression, or sometimes it's expressed in colleagues and other classmates and professors in that university. So that's number one. Number two is, you know, there's a lot of challenging of personal and professional space in predominantly Caucasian universities. There's, you know, this presuming theory that you can't be professional or you can't be that educated, or, you know, if you are, you must have got in because, you know, you're light skinned or you sound proper, or, you know, something like that. Your cousin works in admissions or something like that. So there's no fair you know, thoughts or ideologies about how that person got in and how they're navigating their personal and professional life. There's a lot of marginalized and racially discriminatory thoughts that people around certain people of color in predominantly Caucasian universities maintain, and it creates a problem. The third theory is that a lot of people of color are being emotionally and psychologically impacted by these microaggressions, and they're also being emotionally and psychologically impacted by preconceived notions that their peers may have or their professors may have. So that's the third theory. And the fourth theory is that people of color in these predominantly Caucasian universities also struggle with fatigue and headaches and other symptoms like exhaustion and burnout. And that kind of brings down their ability to compete. It also affects their ability to see themselves in a positive light. You know, they begin to lack confidence and their self-esteem is low because of all the stress and pressure and competition and marginalization and assumptions that the individual has to go through. So racial battle fatigue really is an interesting concept because it's all inclusive. It tries to say that it's not just a theory, it's not just an idea, it's an actual thing that people experience on a daily basis who are of color, and they have to be in an environment where there's predominantly Caucasian individuals, primarily in universities where they're trying to get their education. But we can also extend that outward and say, okay, in the work environment, in neighborhoods, right, in playgrounds and shopping malls, where individuals have to really feel the pressure of needing to prove themselves in order to be accepted. You know, imagine if that were you. I've experienced it. I've gone to really highly respected and high-class universities, and I tended to be the only multi-ethnic individual in the classroom. And a lot of times I was really good at the information, and I got some pushback because of that. So, you know, I think it's an interesting concept, and I think it's a concept that needs to be accepted by psychologists and explored and picked and pulled apart. That's one of the reasons why we have this channel, guys, because we get a chance to throw out various concepts, talk about it, explore it. You guys give me your feedback, and I think all of that helps new subscribers, and it also helps older subscribers to kind of piece things together and begin to explore psychologically, well, what does this mean and why is that an issue? And right, so I'm so glad that we get a chance to do that on this channel. I hope that this video was helpful to you. If it was, please give it a thumbs up and share with somebody who might benefit from it. I will see you guys on Friday with another video. Bye-bye.